Welcome back everyone. It's finally that time of the year when game releases are picking up. So naturally, I'm going to look at a game that's around a decade old. Mostly because I still don't have a PS4, an Xbox One, or a Wii U. But wait. That doesn't mean my review is irrelevant. Dragon Ball Z Xenoverse just came out last month, so I figured this would be a good time to take a look at a cult classic in the history of DBZ fighting games, Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3. Not Tenkaichi 3. We're going old school here. DBZ Budokai 3 was developed by Dimps, published by Atari, and released on November 16th of 2004 in North America. It was later re-released with patches and more content when the game got its greatest hits print run. We'll unfortunately be looking at the original build of the game, though the only thing we're really missing is a few costumes and an interesting glitch. The original Budokai series of games generally found mediocre reviews from critics, with lack of depth usually being cited as the primary issue. But that didn't stop the games from selling like hotcakes. Their popularity with fans was unquestionable, with many believing that these were the most honest representations of the show that had ever been made in an interactive medium. Each of the games is considered to have its own upsides and downsides, with Budokai 3 excelling in the gameplay, content, and immersion categories. So let's delve into that. The first thing you're likely to notice about Budokai 3 is how smooth it runs, and how fast the pace is. This game plays very differently from most fighting games, as it only very loosely fits into the Street Fighter design philosophy. Instead, gameplay is focused more on keeping your ki energy as high as you can, so that you have as many options available to you as possible. Ki energy dictates almost everything in matches. If you don't have enough ki, you can't use super attacks, ultimate attacks, transformations, dodges, teleports, or basically anything but normal punches and kicks. You expend ki when doing any of these actions, though you can gain it back either by powering up or using said basic punches and kicks. Every tall bar in your ki meter will also charge naturally over time if you aren't using energy. This game is so different from normal fighting games that the tutorial section is a must for new players. Luckily, it's pretty robust and takes the time to teach you everything the combat system has to offer without expecting godlike precision. Just take your time and make sure you retain the information given to you. In Budokai 3, each character can start with anywhere from 1 to 7 life bars, depending on the mode and setting. To keep things simple, each life bar is equal to 1,000 points of damage. It's your goal to take your opponent down to no health, and you have a host of options to do this with. Super attacks can be placed into regular attack combos just like in Street Fighter, though they can also be started with simple shortcut button combinations to ensure that new players can play without remembering complex attack chains. It's also useful for experienced players to counter the moves of their opponents. Characters are also capable of several other options, including teleporting both offensively and defensively, grab attacks, initiating transformations that power them up or modify their supers and ultimates, taking flight at any time, and even implementing a sort of metagame through the use of capsules. In Budokai 3, you actually get to choose what attack options your characters have by building a set of capsules they have access to when fighting. But above just equipping attacks, you can also equip more complex support modifiers. Some give you more experience or zenny when you win fights. Others boost your defense in certain circumstances, lower ki cost for moves, or heal you. You can even equip the viral heart disease from the show, so that both you and your opponent lose health constantly. But if you're willing to give up another slot, you can give yourself the vaccine so that you're immune to the disease's effects. The combinations are endless, and can drastically change the way fights play out. And there's no shortage of different characters to equip these capsules to either, with 38 being the total number after you've unlocked everyone. And that's not even counting transformations, fusions, and other character modifications like Mecha Frieza. Finally, Budokai 3 has a fairly substantial set of modes to play around in. Dragon Universe is the story mode, and probably the most in-depth. In this mode, you get to fly around looking for battles and loot, on a couple of decently sized maps that are all meticulously crafted to be recognizable for anyone who has watched the show. Even things like the size and shape of islands on planet Namek are consistent with the anime, which makes flying around an absolute joy. In this mode, you simply pick whose story you want to go through, and play it out through travel and battles. Story cutscenes use pretty stock character photos and speech bubbles, though you'll occasionally get voice acting as well. Nearly every main protagonist has a story mode to explore, some of them having alternate reality paths you can take your second or third way through. Even Broly gets his own story mode, where he only seems to know how to say Kakarot over and over again. Kakarot! As you battle, your characters level up and you get to boost the stats of your choosing, creating the ultimate Krillin, or whoever you're into. Anyway, beyond Dragon Universe, you have basic versus play and all of the options you'd expect there. There's a tournament mode that emulates the world tournaments in the show, and you can even play a Cell Games version where there are no ring-outs. Practice is obviously where you can train and learn the ropes, and finally there's Dragon Arena. In this mode, your character levels up just like in Dragon Universe, and you can even carry over your characters from that mode. This is a pure versus mode, except that you're now choosing to fight characters who have their own levels and stats as well. You simply pick an opponent you think you're capable of tackling and go at it. What's more, you can share your character codes with other people, and have them fight a computer version of them, complete with whatever capsules you've equipped and whatever stats you've leveled up. This mode can get incredibly challenging, and it's easily the best place to go if you want to prove your skills in the ring. Initially, gameplay seems to play out largely like you'd expect in a fighting game. Matches play out similar to Tekken or Soul Calibur, where you can dodge in and out of the screen, but combat primarily takes place on a 2D plane. Matches are fast-paced most of the time, with skilled combatants constantly dodging, teleporting, and basically trying to force their opponents into making mistakes. Ultimate attacks can be initiated at any time, as long as the player has also initiated what's called Hyper Mode. In Hyper Mode, you effectively have infinite ki energy for a short period of time. You must either get an ultimate attack or a Dragon Rush off before this time runs out, or you're left completely open to attack. Characters in Hyper Mode still take normal damage, but they aren't staggered by hits like normally. Ultimate attacks, meanwhile, are incredibly slow to initiate. Even computers know to stay far away from anyone in Hyper Mode, because one wrong move can cost them 2 or more life bars in certain circumstances. However, surviving unscathed gets you the chance to dish out the same scale of punishment without resistance. Therefore, most Hyper Mode encounters end in Dragon Rush mode. Dragon Rush is a short minigame split up into 3 rounds of attacks. At the beginning of each round, both players pick a face button. The attacking player wins and deals out punishment if the defending player fails to pick the same face button. When the round is over, the button the attacking player picked is taken off the board, making it a bit easier for the defending player to win out. But if the attacker can make it through all 3 rounds, they get an extra combo, and some characters even have specific attacks that take place here, like Goku using Warp Kamehameha. That's not the only minigame that can take place during fights either. If 2 players far enough away from each other use a beam attack, like Gallic Gun or Kamehameha simultaneously, it will initiate a beam struggle just like in the show. Both players are then forced to spin the analog sticks as quickly as possible to push the beam toward the enemy. The longer it stays in play, the more damage it does. There are also basic combat struggles that play out the exact same way, only with punches and kicks. Ultimate attacks usually employ a minigame where players have 3 chances to charge an on-screen bar as high as they can. The higher bar wins. If the defending player wins, the animation plays out differently, and they take less damage. This minigame is also affected by the final aspect of combat, which is combat stamina. The more fierce the fight, the lower your stamina gets, shown by a little human figure under your life bar that starts at blue and eventually goes to red as you get tired. The lower your stamina, the more difficult it is to effectively time the charging of your meter. All of these minigames are a nice addition, and do a lot to spice up combat. I can see how some people might see them as gimmicks, but I think they're great ways to keep players engaged and on their toes, while not alienating less skilled players. They also allow for the game to look a lot more cinematic than it otherwise would. One final thing to note is that you can sometimes knock players into different parts of the stage, which will show a canned animation cutscene and do extra damage to them. This means that it's important to know where you are in the stage so that you can use this to your advantage. So with all of this said and done, what's wrong with this combat system? Honestly, there's only 2 things I can think of. Some characters have a severe lack of attacks they can equip. This leaves most people who may favorite someone like Oob out in the cold, because he's extremely limited compared to most of the others. This also means that some of the characters are slightly imbalanced. Goku at Super Saiyan 4 will do a few hundred more points of damage from Supers and Ultimates than anyone else can, outside of Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta. But that doesn't really do much to affect anything, honestly. High-level players will know how to combat the issue, and low-level players won't even notice. The other problem with the combat system is kind of a big one though, depending on who you ask. Charging your ki completely halts combat. You'd think it'd be a great risk-reward system because you're completely vulnerable when charging your ki, but it doesn't work out that way. Both players and computers see when their opponent is charging ki, and unless their ki is already full, they're likely to take that chance to charge their own. This leads to battles stopping entirely several times each round so that people can stand there and power up. It's silly and destroys the pacing of the game. For some people, this is a deal breaker. Whether it is for you will likely depend on how much fun you find the rest of the combat. This game is beautiful. For me personally, this is the most beautiful a DBZ game has ever looked. The thick black line work, the great cell shading, the lack of glossy reflections that so many of the modern titles employ, it all just screams Akira Toriyama, and definitely does his style the most justice. In fact, the development team was so proud of this that they dubbed the style Toriyama shading, probably hoping it would catch on. While I haven't played it, I can only imagine it looks even better in the HD collection. Speaking of the HD collection, I really can't comment on the music there either. You see, Kenji Yamamoto was the original composer for Budokai 3. The original soundtrack in the PS2 version? It's fantastic. I absolutely love this soundtrack. However, there is also strong evidence that a lot of the melodies and such he used were stolen from other artists. Therefore, the HD collection has a vastly different soundtrack in order to avoid copyright issues.
If we both wear one of these, we'll fuse with each other! We'll combine to form a single warrior with incredible power!
Fusion? You've got to be joking! Why would I want to fuse with you? No thanks!
Voice acting here is fine, though the writing is extremely rushed, and if you don't know the story of DBZ, it'll leave you lost. Each character's Dragon Universe mode only highlights their own battles, so it skips around a lot.
Now I'm Super Vegito! Yeah, and?
Beyond that, the game has a lot of nice little touches. Potara earring fusions are permanent, as are transformations for characters who are never shown going back to their base form. However, fusions created through the fusion dance only last about 30 seconds. Other cool nods to the series exist too. For example, if a Cyberman self-destructs when fighting Yamcha, it'll automatically be a one-hit KO. Stages themselves are all reminiscent of places in the show, and many of them have multiple areas you can play in, and can be destroyed by extremely powerful attacks. None of this impacts gameplay much, but it's just nice to see additions like this included. This is a new segment that I decided to add mostly because it's such a great idea. I don't at all claim to have created this idea. That honor goes to SNESman16. He was very gracious in allowing me to do something similar to his Things to Make It Better segment. I'll link to his channel in the description. Even though he's on an indefinite hiatus as of now, it's still definitely worth checking out and supporting his work. So what improvements would I make to this game? Well, firstly, I would definitely slow the pace of the story cutscenes down. There's no lip flaps to animate, so they have all the time in the world to flesh out the story and keep the characters in character. And since any scene can be skipped by simply pressing start, this won't get in the way of players who just want to get to the action. Secondly, fix the lack of capsules some characters have. There are plenty of things in the show to pull from, and it's not like you can't just make up an attack or two. Being true to the show is obviously important, but there's little point in making such a large roster of characters if so many of them feel half-finished. Finally, and most importantly, fix the key system so that you don't have to power up so often. My thoughts are to make ki automatically charge up significantly faster, so that actually powering up by choice can be used for other things. Maybe powering yourself up makes you temporarily do more damage, or gives you an overflow of ki to use. Another option would be to tie it directly to ultimate attacks or something, similar to the Tenkaichi series. They could even just make the key a secondary thing tied directly to special moves like ultimate attacks or transformations, and give the player infinite energy for teleports and supers. The most important thing is that you have to actually weigh your options before you charge your key, rather than the battle stopping every 20 seconds so that everybody can power up. DBZ Budokai 3 is a pretty great game for a licensed title, but what's more, it's a pretty great game in general as well. It is damaged quite a bit by the key charging problem, but if you can overlook that, you have a very unique fighter that has plenty of content for fans of DBZ, people looking to get eased into the fighting game genre, or just fans of fighting games looking for something different. If you fit into any of those three categories, this game is definitely worth a glance. Thanks for watching, and see you again next video.